welcome to my presentation on my innovative technology, which I have called Listen Closely. So just to take you through what I'll be talking about today. So I'll be talking about the main problem in theatre that I found, some similar technology, and then finally my concept, the Listen Closely technology. So one of the largest issues in theatre is the inclusivity of it. Even though it has got better over previous years, there is still a lot more that can be done. Theatre performances can be very overwhelming, especially for those who have certain sensory needs, and these can be addressed better within our industry. Those who are hard of hearing can also struggle to enjoy a stage performance. And with my technology idea development, this can change. And the main idea of Listen Closely is that the audience member can individually create their own sound mix. So when researching, I found products that were similar to mine, but there was nothing of the same application or the specifications. So the closest product that I found to mine was the Peaks RX. So this is a technology here that you can see. So their first show was with Elton John, where they toured with him in America pre-pandemic. They use their device to allow audience members of concerts in arena spaces to mix their own sound by Bluetooth connecting their mobile phone to the circular device, which you can see just there. So this goes over your head with that just around your chest area, and then the in-ear headphones go in your ears. So how it works is the audio signal is sent from the source to the monitor's engineer mix, and then it goes into a specialised Peaks audio workstation where the data is then audio transmitted, which then goes to radio signals and then connects to the device at the base. These are just some reviews that I found from it. So you can see there, Null said, nothing short of a reinvention of the arena concert experience. And Karnoy said, I'm actually wearing a pair of headphones at a concert, which is a little strange, which I think we can all appreciate would be very strange. So this is what the app would look like when you download it. It's been described by audience that it's easy to use for audience. It's available on both Apple and Android. And the sections that you can see are vocals, guitar, keys, bass and drums. So how it works is the audience download the Peaks app, and then there's little lights that are on the Peaks device, and on the app it describes what they all mean. So for example, the blue flashing means it's ready to connect, the green means it's out of range and you can't hear anything, purple means that it's in range, and then red means that there's low battery. So with all of these you can control each mix and you can hear what you need to hear. These are some just more reviews of it. So even a song that doesn't interest you, Peaks gives you plenty to amuse yourself with, which I think we can all appreciate. Some gigs, there's songs that you don't want to hear, so at least this would be something that you can interact with. And then as I move the slider, the sound of David Johnston's lead guitar gradually begins to reveal itself until it's distinctly heard, changing the whole dynamic of this iconic song. And that was Karnoy talking about Rocket Man. So the positives of this Peaks technology is that the headphones are supplied, but you can swap out the headphones, but they have to be wired. It is overall a low cost for the consumer, so it's $15 extra US per headset, which you rent for the show, which in UK money is £12.04. And then you also get a range of coverage from in the auditorium, from the standing seats to the balcony, at the top of the balcony. It is aimed more for the people in the balcony because the main PA, it doesn't reach as well as it does in the standing area, and you just get that bit more of a personal connection to the show itself. So the negatives, however, of this technology is that the given headphones are in-ears, and wearing these for a prolonged amount of time can become uncomfortable. The headsets that go around the neck as well, so the whole device itself, can be uncomfortable as well as distracting. And then the device can lose signal outside of the auditorium, which means that you could miss some of the experience. This could be for like when you're going to the toilet or getting a drink from the bar. So the Listen Closely technology is kind of a development from Peaks, but also a mix with some other technology, which I'll be talking about shortly. So the idea is that you remove the large headset and it all works on an app on your own phone, and then you can connect it to your own personal headphones. This means that it's more comfortable as well as less distracting. You can use it for a larger range of use as well. So this could be in theatres as well as site-specific. So the unconventional part of this technology is the web-based streaming of a live performance, which I'll be talking about shortly. And this technology could be used for assisting those during the theatre performance, and this includes those who are hard of hearing as well as those who have certain sensory needs, as I said previously. So this technology combines different existing technologies such as Peaks and Audio Fusion, who focus on personalised performer in-ear monitoring. So how does the system work? So the system would work in a similar way to Audio Fusion, which is used for musicians, as I've just previously said. So sound comes from the source, and then it would go into the desk. So the show would still require a sound mixer to ensure that the main mix is equal, as well as sound sources correctly equalised, and vocals and instruments and so on and so on. Then from the desk, sound is put through a computer where the data is converted through a specialised software, and this would require an extra engineer to make sure that the in-ear sound is to the same quality as the main PA. Then it would connect to a dedicated Wi-Fi router, and then you'd ask audience to connect to the same Wi-Fi, and it would all link up to the app automatically. The Wi-Fi, however, would not let audience have access to internet, and this is so that you can reduce the amount of distractions for both audience and performers. It would be asked that audience members who wish to use the technology bring their own over-the-ear headphones, as this reduces both the cost for the audience as well as the theatre. However, if they are unable to bring their own over-the-ear headphones, the theatre would be able to provide some, and this would be something that would be out of the cost of the theatre. It is very important, however, that the headphones are not noise cancelling, and this is because of how noise cancelling works, with the mics trying to cancel out the sound waves in the space around you, and you're trying to hear the same sound waves, so it kind of cancels itself out. So this is a very not detailed mock-up of what the app would be, but I like to call it simplistic but sleek. The background would be black, and this is to reduce distractions for others, so there's no bright light. And then each channel is colour coordinated. This isn't only to keep the app cohesive, but also those who possibly can't communicate as well as others, and they can just say white up and white down, stuff like that. So the main channels that you would have would be vocals, music, sound effects and ambience. The levels would be automatically set at the recommended levels, which would be personalised for each show. And this is to maximise the sound quality and to continue the sound design. However, the whole point of this is that people can create their own sound mix, so you would let people know in the beginning of the app opening up, these are the recommendations, but it is your experience, you do with what you wish. So I'm just going to be talking about cost and sustainability. I'll first be talking about cost. So if the app was made from scratch, the average app development at the minute in the UK costs from around £30,000 to £140,000. So it is quite a lot, and it would more likely be on the higher end, so the app is available on all phone types. Venues would then download a software and that would act as the middle processor, so if you remember that computer, and venues would pay for a licensing fee. There is no hardware required, but we would recommend headphones such as the Sennheimer HD400S headphones. I did a lot of research into headphones that would be suitable for this, and I picked these headphones because they are comfortable in reviews, and they are relatively affordable as well as suitable for this product use. Once the system is set up, it would just need money to upkeep the actual technology as well as app updates. So overall the cost would be significant in the start-up, but then once it's all set up you just need the licensing cost. To make it more accessible as well, the audience users, they wouldn't have to pay anything, it would all be out of the cost of the theatre. Now I'll talk about sustainability. This product is very sustainable, and this is because it can be used in any show, which I'll be talking about now. So the first show that I thought of was Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. As you can see from the images, it's a bright, eventful, there's quite a lot going on, it's quite a lot to take in as well. So the moment that I'll be talking about is this image here. So at this point in time, the Potts family and Truly are being chased by Bulgarians in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. They're being chased by Bulgarians for the car Chitty Chitty Bang Bang in the sea. So in this moment there is a lot going on. There is a song, so there's both vocals and musicians. There is pyros, which would be counted as ambient sound, and then there are sound effects of gunfire and ship horns. So having the listen closely system, it would allow audience to control what they hear. For example, they could silence the sound effects if they don't like the loud bangs, and the headphones would muffle the pyros as well as bringing down the ambient sound. Another example that I thought of was pantomimes. Everyone's been to a pantomime, everyone should be going to a pantomime. They are very embedded in our UK culture. The issue with them, however, is that they're not very inclusive in their hard of hearing, in the hard of hearing sector. So, for example, sign performances will be in the middle of the week on a matinee. Not everyone can go to that. So having this system would mean that you wouldn't, if you were hard of hearing, you wouldn't have to go to those specialised performances. So just a little quick summary, it allows audience comfort by losing the system around your neck versus the peak system, as well as less distracting. You can use it for any show, and this also includes site-specific. For example, a show could be in the middle of the Brayford and advertise for audience to bring their own headphones and just all connect to the same Wi-Fi. And this means that there's less noise pollution in the city, as well as saving costs designing a specialised PA. And then finally, inclusivity, which is ever more increasing in importance. Thank you for listening. Are there any questions? Hello.
Me?
Yeah.
Cool. So, yeah, I really enjoyed that. Thank you, Freya. First thing first, this sort of stuff is like across the pond in America, like the American football has done for ages, that you can get like the commentator's experience in your seat, and the example that you give for signed performances and it makes sense. I suppose thinking about like arena concerts, because that seemed to be what some of the visual examples were pointing towards.
That's what Peaks does, it says as concerts.
Okay, just for me, can you explain a little bit more about what the rationale is for the audience experience there? Because the examples that we've just said about signed performances, and I can quite clearly see what the rationale is. What for you do you think? What's the big benefits of having this for those sorts of arena-style concerts?
So arenas, you could do the very similar to Peaks, but for this, I ideally would just want to keep it in theatre rather than in concerts, just because there is already something out there for that. I know it limits the avenue of it, but I've found that there's more of a market in theatre rather than concerts, and there is already something there that you can use, if that makes sense.
Cool. Thank you.
Is there a concern that, as an audience member, you can maybe ruin the sound design that has been created by a front of house engineer or sound designer by taking control of the app? And is there something that you would put in place, or some way of controlling and managing that?
So when you open up the app, it would have all the instructions on it, including a description of when you're actually on the app itself, if I can go to it. There would be recommendation lines, so that would be something that would be preset by the audio mixer and be like, this is where we recommend you put stuff, and then that way you kind of ensure that you're at least trying to get across the best sound. But the whole point of this is that it can be flexible, but there would be like a reset in a way of the lines that people can go back to the original sound, if that makes sense.
Okay, good, thank you.
Yeah, it's really fascinating because like, you literally, when you look through this, and you can see so many like live event scenarios where this sort of stuff is probably starting to emerge, or would be really welcome. Like just, I don't know, you can think of a host of sporting events where the ability to access television or radio commentary, I'm sure that stuff is probably happening, or at least this sort of thing would be welcome towards that level of control. I think it's really fascinating.
Hello.
You mentioned about how they can be used to help people with sensory difficulties when it comes to loud sound effects such as pyro and pantos. So say for example, the fairy came on and there was really nice twinkle sound effects, so I turned up because I really enjoyed the soft nature of that. is there a way that you could warn the audience that there is about to be a pyro bang? Like, is that something you consider?
That's not something that I've thought of, but I would invent that, because that is a good idea. I've not thought of that, and I probably should have done, but that,
Okay, any more questions? Okay, round of applause for Sarah.
Hello, my name is Callum and this is my contemporary production technology presentation, and my focus is on an immersive and interactive experience with the audience's experience and engagement in focus. So the idea, immersive experiences and pre-shows. In the minute there currently may be a stage that's got a couple of lights on highlighting parts of the set, but it's not venue wide. So part of my experience is I want to bring that as soon as you walk through the door, the theming starts, the engagement starts, the audience are there from the first off. So create a themed, immersive, interactive experience. Interactivity is part of it. It can be part of like an experience, an installation, or but also that bit of that, if the themed and the immersive bit is the key bit I'm trying to nail down with the audience control at certain points when they need to be. It can be arranged into sort of like immersive experiences, pre-show scenarios. It's like a range of situations. It's not limited to, it's not one of them technologies. It's like, it's just this. It's open source. So if I want to do a pre-show experience for Macbeth 1 week, but then I've got to do a photo booth sort of interactive thing the next week, it's open source. It's not just proprietary to that thing. It can be programmed and customised to anything it needs to be. And it's the heart of that is QLab. I chose to go down the route because of the power and the control that piece of software has, taking the range of inputs in, such as triggers, and have that flexibility for outputs. So it's got a range of a lot of power behind there, which I think is great for this. So you don't need to have like a programmer or a piece of code written specifically for that experience. It's open source. A technician can be at the heart of this program and this, making it so it's very much a flexible and adaptable solution. So just recapping on the scenarios, this is not a list of exact things that can be deployed in, this is just a rough guide. So it could be a pre-show experience, so this could be something happening on stage, venue-wide, and the audience could have input into it, or it could be triggered by a time code. So let's say 7:15, 50 minutes before a show, something can happen, it'll be part of the demonstration later on, and the whole venue is themed to part of that. Instead of having a pre-show announcement, something happens to signify that the auditorium door's now open, or it's X amount of time before the show starts. Got installation in the venue, so this could be part of like a photo booth, but not a photo booth. It's like something the audience can engage with. So it's themed to that show. They can go in, like a bit like a walk through a tunnel. You have like motion sensors and triggers, and it's themed to that show, a bit like a storyline before you walk in. So let's say it's a Little Shop of Horrors. You could do like 1960s New York, and have like a walkthrough of where the play's set. So you like get in the headset of the storyline, and you're introduced like maybe the characters and the place before you actually go into the auditorium itself. You've got interactive elements, so pantomime could be a good example of this. If you want the audience to have interactive parts of the show, maybe you could have motion sensors, or you could have like a keypad, which could then be input into QLab. That could be in the audience. Also, the actors can trigger it. So say they do a part of the show, you can have laser sensor, or you can have a motion sensor on stage, and the actors actually physically triggering what they're doing. So instead of having a technician that maybe hasn't got great line of sight in an old theatre, or hasn't got the ability to, the actors there, it hits at the same time, which is quite a cool feature. And also it's venue-wide. So this can, instead of just being a pre-show on the stage, which members of the audience, if they're in the front of house there or at the bar, they're going to miss out on the theming. So my key is getting it venue-wide, so as soon as you walk through the door, the theming hits you straight away. You're not, I've just walked into a theatre, oh there's the main room, oh, there's the theming. So the technology behind this is, keep going back to that key point of immersive and interactive. The audience has the ability to control the experience at certain points that would soon suitable. The main element is linking technology together that already exists. So instead of going down the route of having complex codes, complex lasers, software, QLab allows that power, but also it's open source. And there's forums, there's Facebook groups, there's a community out there of support, whereas you don't really get that with a piece of software that you're going to make just for a one-off experience. And again, with it being open source, you can change it every week. So if it's Little Shop of Horrors 1 week, and then you've got Back to the Future in the next week, you've got that freedom to quickly change it, but you're not starting from scratch. You can still use that base QLab file, the triggers are the same, everything's the same, it's just you're changing the theming really. So the main heart of the input of this is the triggers. So how are you actually getting QLab? Because the idea of it is not to be an operator stood at a Mac or someone in a tech box firing it. So you've got something like motion sensors, which is, I've seen an example of this one with a Raspberry Pi. So you have like a motion sensor, Raspberry Pi, oh, someone walked under me, tells QLab, someone's walked under me, fire that cue that it's related to. Laser sensors, that's similar to motion sensors, but when the beam of laser is broken, that then tells QLab, hello, I've just been trigger your cue. Physical buttons, I've got an example over here, we'll stream that later on, and that's physical, actual tactile buttons that the audience can press. Or that could be also could be like a keypad. So I'm going to go into an example of Monopoly Live later on, and how can the audience have physical buttons to engage with that. And also time triggers as well. So that could be quite good for the pre-show. If you know the show's starting at 7:30 and you want a 15-minute countdown to happen, get that to trigger at 7:15, it happens exactly at the same time. Obviously you'd have to worry about front of house, of you get everyone in, but then that's when you'd start maybe saying, right, let's aim to get the audience in a bit earlier, just we've got that bit of redundancy in there of the show goes up at this time. So one of the cases I looked at was making an experience. So I went down the route of Monopoly Life size. So this is an experience in London, and it's basically a life-size Monopoly. So I thought, how can I make this technology be deployed in this scenario? So we've got it's an immersive experience, this is an example of. So I've got two cases. We've got this one which is going to focus on an immersive experience, and I'm also going to do Back to the Future, and that'll be a pre-show, and so I can show the difference between the two. So the main part of this is the audience in control, and there's not a storyline. So like with normal Monopoly, the same sequence of events doesn't happen every time, so it'd be impossible to sit there keyless in it. So that by using triggers and inputs, you've got that flexibility and power for it to follow the storyline, as it's obviously randomly generated. And the system allows this because it's unique. So instead of having someone having to follow along, maybe in a control box out the way, this is reliable because the technology will be there proven, as long as it's been tested to showcase this. So at the heart of it is a QLab file. This is the heart of it. This is where all the inputs are being into, and then this is sending all the outputs to maybe to like OSC, to EOS, time code, like Resolum or Abelites, and internally as well. So you've got like internal sound effects, which go off a PA system, and you can also do inbuilt AV, so handing over HDMI to a projector or a video wall in the venue. Range of triggers, so again, this one will be quite good. So motion sensors, physical buttons, like keypad or timers, so after 90 minutes, the whole QLab file will go, right, it's been 90 minutes, that's the end of the experience. Close down and say, thank you for playing, exit over here. So then I'm going to demonstrate how this can be put into example. So this I'm using a TV screen as an output for video. There's no reason why can't this be upscaled. So in theory, this could be projection into the floor. It could be video wall, video floor, video in the roof. This could be anywhere. So it's an example of how this is outputted. I'm using a makey as inputs. So when you walk on that part of the board, it triggers. And I'm also using Stream Deck as physical tactile buttons. And I'm using these metal plates as simulated floor. So there's obviously the limitation of the makey is you need to be earthed to it, and it's only metal contacts. So just to demonstrate how this can be used. So the first player would walk onto that plate. It would say, you have walked on to Piccadilly Circus, would you like to buy this property? Then using a keypad, which would be wireless, the user has the ability to say, no, I don't want to buy this, and move on to the next one. Then the next player would walk along, and they'd walk across they'd walk onto a plate as well, and then that would trigger it to go. They'd walk across to go to jail. So the lighting in the venue would go red. It'd be projection, but also be sound effects along with this, which would say go to jail. Then I'd use atmospheric, maybe a smoke machine on the roof, which will see DMX into this, so it fires, and a bit of a go-go, and be lighting, looking at the pathway of where they need to go, follow the route there. And player 3 would then go, and they, for example, would walk across pass and go, which would be a motion sensor in the rig. They'd trigger that, it would go, I use this pass and go. And another, you look at using AR goggles for this experience as well. So the audience could use AI, Google Glass, and in their right-hand side, they could see their bank balance of what they got, and then on the left-hand side, they could see what properties they own. So it's really a full enhanced experience. So then during that thing, you'd see the money total up into your account. And the fourth person would land on King's Cross. It would say, do you want to buy this property? And you're on your little keypad, or you could also be voice activated, similar to an Alexa. So you can go, yes, I want to buy this. Then it comes up with the video content that are in the venue saying, you're now in King's Cross. And you'd see that on your little goggles as well, come up saying, add that to your list of things. So obviously the limitations with that is make is only metal, so it wouldn't be very good to deploy large scale, and the Stream Deck is wide, and also it's not running wirelessly. So that's something you'd have to maybe have an app or a keypad that could be also used. So now I'm going to show how it can be deployed into a pre-show experience. So that's taking inputs from the audience and they're controlling it. So this is taking a step back from the triggers, like the physical triggers, but I'm going to just explain how things can be deployed venue-wide. So this is not just focusing on one room, this could be venue. So this demonstration here, I've got a capture file of a rig, and I've also got some lights back here demonstrating how these could be deployed into a front of house, like a bar area. So this is going to be controlling lights, sound, AV, scenery, and this could also go as far as like special effects, stuff like that could be DMXable. In both an auditorium area, so on stage, and the front of house location, such as a bar or a foyer. So again, QLab files at the heart of it, which has the ability, for in this example, I'm using OSC out of QLab to talk to ECOS, which is then coming out of streaming ACN into a node. I'm using built-in AV and video and audio. So the AV is being sent internally into via NDI into capture, and you'll see that display later on. And this would be a clock trigger. So instead of someone being sat front of house for 3, 2, 1, go, exactly X time, so if the show starts at 7:30, this would fire at 7:15, with a 15-minute time down to the show starts. So this is sort of replicating a pre-show announcement. Instead of like breaking the fourth wall saying hello, welcome to the theatre, the show starts in 15 minutes, please take your seat. This is something visually happening and engaging and keeping with that theme as well. So you know the pre-show state that would happen, then at 7:15, the QLab would fire, the light would begin to change, there'll be lighting change in the auditorium too, keeping it venue wide. We've got scenery moving in, we've got AV kicking in, which is the screens just flowing in, that's saying how it can trigger AV flying cues as well. And then after so long, it brings up a countdown, and then the venue goes back to the pre-save, so the audience now know they've got X amount of time before the show starts. Get seats ready for the show to start. So the equipment involved in this, we've got triggers, so we've got motion sensors, physical buttons, keypads, so in that example I've used a Stream Deck, and you can have clock triggers, so I've built that built into QLab itself. The heart of that is QLab itself. That's sort of the heart of the experience. That's controlling, it's taking the inputs and it's sending outputs either internally or it's in like OSC via COS, or there's nothing stopping you using other control software. So I used audio projection internally, and for this example I used OSC to EOS, but there's nothing stopping using timecode to maybe Ava Light or Grand NA, or if you want to use external video, maybe like timecode or MIDI triggers, something like AI or Resolute. In the output sources list, you've got lighting fixtures, you've got special effects units, PA speakers, maybe like DJ headphones, and you've got projection TV video services. And this is scalable. So I've got 4 lights here, TV screen and a capture file. What's stopping me using a 7.1 surround system in another venue using a rig? So it's using a rig as well. So it's plug and play in a way. It's not having to be coded for that equipment. So I'm going to start with the effectiveness of the experience. So it's immersive, it's getting the audience involved straight from the off. You're not waiting for the show to start, you're not waiting to be sat down. As soon as you walk through the venue, you're being themed. So in the Monopoly example, the audience controls the timeline. It's not pre-programmed, it's not being controlled by someone. They're in physical control of it and they get to interact with it, with the technology. It's fairly simple to an operation, so it's just QLab skills and EOS skills or whatever programming tools you use, and it's achievable fairly simply as well. So cost, for this demonstration here, it's just about £2,000 to achieve. But the thing with the cost for this is it's hard to tell because a lot of this is in-house. So instead of having to go out and buy specific pieces of software to achieve this or pieces of hardware to do it with, a lot of theatres may already have QLab licenses, lighting fixtures, they might already have projections that they're not using for the show, so it's you looking at that in-house stock and going, right, I can use that, I can use that, I can use that, stuff like that. And you're getting the value of it. So and the audience are feeling straight away, so they're remembering that straight off instead of going, oh yeah, I walked in the door and it was sort of a venue, you're there straight away. It's easy to put together as well. So it's not adding in complex pieces of code or anything, it's, alright, I want more lights, right, I add more universes, or I add a bigger sound desk, so surround sound, or we had more projection screens and then use a video server. So it's easy to be upscaled in that sort of sense. So sustainability, a lot of fit with all the equipment like I just said. So you QLab license, EOS, similar, they've already got, so you can use time code. So if then you run maybe like enable lights or a random console and you went to what OSC, stuff like that. You can use video servers and anything that will just plug and play into QLab. And it's commercially sustainable as well. So once it's been programmed and tested, it will work. It's no coding that could probably go wrong. As long as it's been tested properly, it will work. So there's no, I know it takes a job away, but there's not having someone manually sat there pressing it and going. And also, with it being factual equipment, then your technicians know it, know how to run, they know deep down like QLab experience, and if they're using their in-house lighting, they'll know the likelihood is there'll be a programmer there that can use their desk. So it's sort of how it's linking everything in without having to have a whole separate system to create the experience. In the feasibility, it's fairly easy to set up, and the programming experience uses similar skills to a performance. So just to conclude then, this was an immersive and interactive experience with the audience in mind. It's creating themed, immersive, interactive experience straight from the off. So as soon as you walk in the theatre, you get hit by that theme straight away, and not just walking into a building with walls. Immersive parts of the show, this is a range of situations this can be deployed in, and it's not just limited to maybe an interactive part of a show, it can be deployed into a range of situations. And it's got that control of QLab at the heart of it, taking inputs from triggers and sources and then sending outputs to make like lighting fixtures and sound. Thank you. Anyone have any questions? Hello.
Do you think that you would need another crew member to run it, or do you think that you could just have your lighting designer or AV operator or somebody like that to run it? Because I know you're saying like it's sort of run by the audience, but would you have somebody there just in case, do you think?
One of them things is maybe you could use the in-house lighting desk to do it. So if it's pre-show, you're not got that worry of it being at the same time. So you could have just like the LD and everything, but it's one of them things of if you got the time, you'd have someone there checking over it, make sure it's working. One of them things really of if it's a long run as well, you'll have a number of nights to be tested. So it's one of them things where it's what is it and what's being deployed really.
I've got a question about the practicality of this software. You said yourself that there's quite a lot of things to marry up to make this work for something like interactive Monopoly. Because there's quite a lot of technology that would then be like essential to that experience, what are the sort of starting parameters to say you wanted to install an interactive game of Monopoly in here? Just on the tech alone, what would be like the
So
starting?
the staffing would be similar to a show. So you maybe have an LD, the audio technician, and you maybe have an AV programmer. But once that's in programmed, each individual bit's programmed, it's just really someone that can use QLab to marry it all up. Then to be honest, it's just a technician that needs to power it on, test it in the morning, and it sort of runs. So it's no larger than a normal show. It's just obviously it's just an extra step for it to all link together.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Callum.
Well,
Good.
Welcome to my presentation. So I decided to look at escape room enhancements. So why did I do that, you wonder? So I visited a local escape room and enjoyed the experience, having to work with my team of friends to try and solve the puzzles that were put before us. However, one of the issues that we were faced with on the day was some of the puzzles were faulty, whether that's because they weren't functioning just for an unknown issue, or perhaps some of the components were faulty in them. So that got me thinking, is there anything I could do to engage with the escape rooms to create a more sustainable puzzle? So what I found was that after visiting the escape rooms to have a quick tour of their puzzles, see what kind of components they have to create their games, I found that a lot of the games, whilst they relied on low-tech technology, I found that they were still too complicated for the casual staff and employees to be able to fix by themselves. So that was one of the problems I wanted to address. Talking about problems, or as I like to say, opportunities. So recently we've seen the decline of the high street. 17,000 and counting sites across the UK have shut their doors for the last time. Now, the immediate fact we see here is that is a lot of job losses. However, we could spin this and see that is 17,000 potential venues with vacancies up and down the high streets, presenting the opportunity for new escape room expansions. Secondly, there's a shift from having to doing. So consumers are wanting to invest their hard-earned money more into getting these experience rather than buying things that they can consume or have this one-time thrill of, such as food, jewellery, things like this. Furthermore, there are over 1,500 escape rooms in the UK. This means that there is a large market already well established, showing that the market is thriving and, in my opinion, waiting for new technology to enter the doors. The US and China have the largest proportion of escape rooms worldwide. There's 50 to 60,000 worldwide escape rooms, and popularity across Europe is increasing. And in the US alone, there's an expected market value of $7 billion by 2028. As you can see here, I've got a map which shows the location of all of the escape rooms in the UK plus Ireland which have been reviewed. So you can see in terms of distribution, there's a large clump here around London, same for Liverpool, Manchester area, as well as Birmingham. Now this is important because my research has shown that this distribution trends are comparable to the tourist attractions in the area. So these major cities are where international tourists are wanting to travel. You can see roughly around here, we've got a couple of escape rooms as well in Lincoln. And you can see that across the UK there is a low density spread of these escape rooms. So yeah. My idea is to use show control software to enhance immersive escape room experiences. So using equipment such as QLab, ETC, EOS to really immerse the audience into the experience they're having within the rooms. I want to enable the creation of more in-depth puzzles through the use of open source hardware and software. So this is where I start to talk about Arduinos, which are essentially small computer boards that you can use to communicate with a central computer. So they will receive inputs from things like buttons, switches, sensors, and convert that into code which can be read and then outputted through QLab. Secondly, I want to bring the established stories of theatre into an interactive environment. So it's the idea of using QLab, which technicians are familiar with. They can take it straight out, their knowledge straight out of the theatre into unconventional venues such as these escape rooms. And as well, the puzzles could be customizable within the software to set things like difficulty for the playroom. So you could have a group that you know have gone to various different escape rooms and they're very well versed in what kind of puzzles you can expect. So what you could do is you could have a list of preset puzzles that you can drag into the QLab, which reflects on the inputs that you already have in the room, which adds that extra level of difficulty to really create variety in the room that you can provide for the audience. So here's a deeper look at the tech that I plan to use. If we look on this side, we've got the Arduino Giga R1 Wi-Fi board. So what's important about this board for my application is that it's Wi-Fi enabled. That means that you could have one of these within a centerpiece set. So say for example, this is an escape room, I've got a podium here. Within the internal, I can put one of these Arduino chips. All it would need is a power supply over USB-C, and then I can communicate over a wireless network to my show computer that's running QLab. So these pins here are where we can have our inputs with devices such as an RFID chip reader. So I can hide this within the structure of this table, put a surface over like a small mat, and then I could have props such as playing cards, which are actually RFID cards. When located over the reader, it will initiate a cue, whether that's a special spotlight, a sound effect, or a video content, all managed through QLab. Furthermore, we've got motion sensors, so you could have a box, for example. If a participant puts their hand in the box, we can get the information that they have interacted with the piece of set, and something could happen within the room to highlight this. And then this is where we start to go into our higher end applications of the technology. So I would typically suggest to use QLab with a node, that way the show control is within the one app, so you can have the lighting control, the sound control and the AV all centralized, and there is only one show computer. However, if I was to install into a more complex area, I would bring a Gadget 2, which allows 2 universes of outputs with the Nomad USB key as well. This is on the higher end though. You can expect to pay around £800 for this package alone. So you really need to have the use case for it. And then on my very extreme size, I have the ZAC tracks here, which can be implemented in several different ways. One of them being you can have the trackers placed within pieces of props. So maybe there's a coffee cup, you're in a police station, there's a coffee cup, and inside you have a location tracker. So you can track the movement of this prop in 3D space, creating zones within your actual escape room that trigger different cues, much like the scaled down version I talked about earlier. And you can also put it on your participants as well, so you can track where they are in a 3D space, similar to the prop. And as well, we can start to look at really complicated things you'd expect to find within a theatre environment, such as D&B Soundscape, to really level up that immersion that you can get out of these escape rooms. And by looking at these higher end things, you can start to charge higher amounts per head. You can start to really bring in the capital overlays. But here's an example system. So it starts over here. We have the input. Perhaps a player presses a button. What that does is that sends what's called a high signal. And what that is that's a change in current that is electronically sent across wires into the input pins on the Arduino board. What the Arduino board then does within the chips here is it converts that to something called UDP. Now UDP is User Datagram Protocol, and it's designed to transmit data over network. This is where the Wi-Fi enabled part of this chip becomes really important, because we can then send the code over a wireless network to a computer which has the QLab file installed on it. And once it receives this, it recognizes it as a network code, which is used in theatres if you want to control the sound and lighting across 2 different desks within one system. And then you can output something like an LX command as a network queue. In terms of cost of this simple system I've got here, I've priced this at around £461 for just the components. So what this highlights is that the open source nature of an Arduino allows the inputs to be relatively cheap. What you will find with this is completely scalable. So you can start with a button that costs £1.80 that you can find on eBay. You can get packs of 20, they ship from China. or you can get branded buttons that have that, you know, you expect to get more wear and tear out of them. They will last longer in your puzzle. But for this example, I've got one that costs £1.80. The retail price for the Arduino is currently sitting around £59.60. This will be the component that's kind of the weak link in terms of purchasing, as these are often coming in and out of availability. So as a distributor, I'd have to find a wholesaler that is able to give me a guaranteed supply, essentially, of these. QLab, now this is again scalable. So in this example, this is the lighting only license. So you still get some features for audio, not many, but you do, this is the main way that I would recommend creating Alexa output, as you can just have a simple node that can cost £200, so at that's £661 for lighting control and basic sound control of your environment. The license, I like QLab's scheme where they do a rent to buy, so you can, if you're doing an experience that is temporary, you could pay for a week's or 2 weeks worth of a license, and then that will ultimately bring down your price when you go to buy it. And then again, I've not put a price on the output just because purely you could do a very simple Edison bulb that you find in a house, or you can scale it all the way up to a Martin fixture that you'd expect to pay triple, maybe quadruple figures on. So going back to the open source nature, we have room for expansion with the Arduino board. So these are a couple of examples on what sensors you can implement. So here we've got the infrared proximity sensor. So like a motion control you'd expect to find within security systems. We've got the RFID, which I mentioned earlier. And this is where we start to get more into the coding side of it. We've got Arduino photoresistors and laser tripwires. So essentially you could have an expanse of space. It could be as small as a small box, like a jewelry box, that you could detect if someone's taken something out of it. Or it could be if someone's entered a section of a room, for example, through a doorway. And what you can do there is you plug the pins into all these slots. So these are, most of these are analog, with the option of being digital. What that means is something like the switch I showed earlier is an analog signal, on or off. It's very basic, whereas you would expect to find a digital signal through something like this or this here. And then down here, this is very common in escape rooms, is they will have electromagnetic locks on doors or cupboards. So what that means is you have to complete a puzzle to be able to get inside this cupboard. And these can be actually triggered by Arduinos. So we can say that someone has put the RFID card in the right place on the table. Brilliant, they can unlock the door. It's things like this that can really elevate the immersion you've got within your game. So now I want to talk about turning theatre into experience. I've put on here a couple of examples of existing experiences. We've got the London Dungeons, we've got the Gunpowder Plot, which is a new one, it's quite exciting. Wolf of Wall Street is more of an example on one that didn't do too well. This closed within a matter of months. But we've got more successful ones such as Monopoly Life Size, which is still going strong now after opening in 2021. So what I would like to bring to the market is a Back to the Future the Musical escape room. So the kind of things that you'd be able to do here is you could implement the storyline. So as long as the story has some sort of problem that they have to solve to get to the final ending, then you can create an escape room out of it. The case of Back to the Future, so travels back in time, gets stuck, his car, time machine loses power, so he has to, so Martin McFly has to find a way to get power back to the flux capacitor, in this case through lightning. So you could go through the storyline of having to navigate these past times that he visits in the time machine, and then trying to figure out a way to get electricity to flow to the flux capacitor through games and various triggers. So for example, the final part of the show could be that the audience completes the puzzle, and then at the end there's a massive light show to represent the lighting that is required to power this time machine. It's it's not innovative idea, I'd say. There's high market value to it. So of course someone has kind of picked us to the post. They've got them first. and that is cogs. And my market research has shown that this is actually the only company out there that strictly does technology for immersive experiences. Some of their names you might recognise here: Monopoly Life Size, Peaky Blinders, Saw the Experience, are powered by the cogs technology. And what they provide is a start to finish solution. So you can go to their website and design your puzzles all the way through to getting tech support at the end of it. And what they provide is similar to Ethernet switch blocks, which you plug sensors into. They're about this big, so they're a little bit chunky, they're quite hard to conceal, and they don't work wirelessly. You have to transmit all the data over Cat5 to these boxes. So there could be a restriction there that one of your set pieces is a bit too small to actually have this feature in it. However, you have the bonus of that promised tech support from start to finish. So what I would do to counteract cogs things is my implementation of these open source software such as Arduino. There's a lower price on the products itself, making it more accessible to these smaller escape rooms outside of the bigger cities. That's my slide. Is there any questions? Yes.
Yeah, I suppose my question is, because of having done escape rooms,
Yes.
there's a maintenance thing that comes with this equipment, because escape rooms obviously go through quite a lot of wear and tear.
Sure.
Where do you think, having worked with this technology, where does the maintaining and the maintenance and the upkeep, what factor does that play into this stuff being practical for use?
So what I've experienced through trialling different sorts of systems is the wear and tear kind of happens at the input level. Now, by being able to use the Arduino boards, we can get input systems such as buttons and various triggers and sensors, which are very low cost. So there's two sides to the coin. You've got the low cost, it's very easy to replace. There's typically only 2 pins that you need to connect and in and out. So you could have a casual come in and repair that very easily. But then if you went for the name brand items, such as ones that cogs provide, you've got the promise of it being something that can last a long time and not have to be thought of. But you are paying the extra price for that. So it's again, it's very scalable, like you find in a lot of these systems. You can go for the high-end product, but if you can't afford that at first, there is still these low-end, low-tech solutions which you can provide to start to step up your game. Yes?
Do you think that upscaling the production of it would make the escape room or experience harder for the consumer to do, or do you think that adding the big tech just makes it run smoother?
So I do see your point. I think in terms of creating it, bringing higher end tech into it, really all you're doing is increasing the production value. And in terms of difficulty, I think in that side of it, the difficulty will then come in the upkeep of it, because you're having these large moving parts. You can have set pieces that fly in and fly out, for example. But I believe that through QLab, you're able to customize the experience. You can change the level of difficulty by removing some puzzles to get to the completion of a game, or you can add some in from, say, for example, during the setup of the game, before you've actually brought any audience in, you've got a file that's got extra games in that uses the equipment that you already have in this escape room. So you can expand the difficulty to lower or higher depending on what you see fit. Does that answer both your questions?
Yes.
It's okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
In terms of employability, how, I don't want to use the word simple, but how simple would you make the technology so that people who are resetting the room can do that easily, or would you have someone there who has to be specially trained in the area to reset the room?
The first part of your question, in terms of employability, so when we fit out the room, I would recommend having perhaps a freelance technician from a theatre is familiar with QLab software or the lighting software.
That way we're creating jobs for people within theatres who might be on downtime. In terms of upkeep of the room, due to the open source nature, a lot of the solutions are out there on the internet, they're in forums. So the customer will have the option of going for the tech support. That could be part of a package that could cost more, or they could go to these forums, they could go to these message pages with script and coding that already exists, and potentially the cheaper version of help, if you see what I mean. And in terms of resetting rooms as well, you can program QLab in a way that creates a check sheet at the end of each show, and you can see what things have been moved, especially if you implement something like the ZAG tracks, which becomes more important as you have a bigger escape room like Monopoly Life Size, where there's a lot of moving parts and things need to be back exactly where they were beforehand. Anything else?
No, well done.
I'm Kyle. Today I'm going to talk you through my contemporary performance technology, which is augmented reality. So what I'm going to go through is how I think augmented reality can further progress performances. So what I've been thinking as well is there's not much more you can do, or what I believe there's not much more you can do to improve theatre, because what people have been saying is, especially through this course, is any space is a performance space. So why not put this through into augmented reality? So what is augmented reality, or AR? Is an interactive experience that combines real world and computer generated content. It's a system that incorporates three basic features, such as a combination of real world, virtual, and 3D registered virtual and real objects. So what sort of technologies can actually use AR? So your smartphone, tablets, obviously AR glasses can use AR, and heads-up displays, so many heads-up displays. So if you want to go more into the VR side of it, you know, Oculus Rift and such things as that. So my concept is, like I said before, is to have a full performance fully in AR. So to be able to have to sit at home or on the bus or really anywhere with your phone or with the glasses and have the performance in front of you. So you have that mix between real world and virtual. So even to be able to convert new or older shows to adapt into this style, or even stuff that is in to be played in AR. So the technology I used before, if you had a go at my demo before, is I used Adobe AR. So I created just a little scenario where it's just a spaceman next to Earth, obviously. It's created immersive storytelling. So that is what Adobe's AR. It's free as well. It's really basic. So what you can do is you can make small animations. You can also bring in images or still images and create videos. So you press record and you can walk around and it'll keep to that position. It is spatially aware as well, so interactive experience as well. So you can set in the settings with it does say behaviours. If you get certain amount away, it can move on to the next position, or if you get certain distance to it, or if a person comes near it on the screen, it can actually activate. So say if I moved across onto the screen and I got close enough to actually touch the earth, I can make that spin, or it can move away, depending on how sensitive you have with your technologies. But to further progress this, I looked at volumetric capturing, which is the spinning bicycles over there. So basically, volumetric capturing is where you're in a room, it's a green room, as you can see down here, and you're surrounded by cameras. So it'll record whatever you do, and sound as well, so it'll record sound and video, and it will convert that into their software, which is called HoloStream. So this software is able to obviously record everything that you do and pretty much anything. So a lot of what this program is used mostly for is like video games are used to use this. ASOS and other clothes companies use it. So they'll take a recording of a t-shirt or a piece of clothing, and you'll be able to, it's like a filter, be able to wear it over them. But a lot of games use it for quick programming. But how I would use it is to produce performances. So there is the National Theatre, which in my research is the only ones that have done this, which they've created a show called Everything Limbo, where it's a single person performance and it's just an interactive experience. So this is able to place it anywhere. But the downfall of this is that you are in such a small area, and you can only really get 1 to 2 people, or in this case 2 people and a small pug on screen. This is with this QR code, if you want to, or if you can, if it will work, will take you to the whole website. So it's literally just an AR, little 10-second video of AR, so it should be a small man, what everybody's putting their phones down, should bring you to Arctis Studios' website, and it'll bring up a small person, or however big it... Is it not working?
Not close enough.
Oh no. So basically, what it should do is bring up a small person which will stand in front of you, go, hello, my name is, and you'll be able to walk around when he stays in position. So it's basically a small demonstration of what AR view or volumetric capturing is capable of. Pros and cons to this. It's immersive. I think it's immersive. It's very unique as well. Like I said, there is only one company, obviously Northern Stage, which has done this. Not Northern Stage. getting work mixed up into this. Which has done this, and there's only been one performance. So, like I said before, anything that's any performance space is a stage, and why not move this into virtual reality with the mix of the real world? It's accessible to everybody. If you wanted to use the Adobe, it's free. If you wanted to push further across to it, it is a £45 a month, but that's more all across if you want to design, say, a kitchen or something like that. But it does have potential to move into the performance space. It can be used pretty much by everybody. It's, you know, if you've got a phone, the augmented glasses and stuff like that, you know, anybody can use it. The cost though, on cons, the holostream and the volumetric video is about £3,500, I believe, either a month to use just the software alone. If you were to progress and actually create the space that you needed, for example, all the cameras, the sensors, and the green screening would cost you between, I believe what I read was 20 to up to £100,000. But if you wanted to progress and make a bigger size, it could go well plus of 100,000. It's an adapting technology. It's like I said, there's only one company that's actually been able to do this yet, which I would see as a benefit. Like I said before, what's this is I've lost what I'm saying. Any space is a stage really, and why not push it into augmented reality? Thank you. Questions? Sky.
What kind of performances do you think you would use it for? Do you think it would be more like musicals or like plays or just like immersive experiences or stuff?
I think a bit of everything. I had the conversation with someone over there, and they were like, this could be a really immersive experience, say because what you could do is, say you record a live band, and you'd be able to, say if you've gone to a concert and they've recorded like they've done this way, you can relive that experience again, you know, through virtual, augmented reality, or even if you wanted to put it on the goggles and wear it in VR. So I believe anything really can, within reason. I think I don't think you could do the big Broadway productions, but a lot of smaller ones, like even Shakespeare, I think would be able to do it as well. Yes.
Do you see this as something that would support theatre or something that would replace theatre?
I feel like it probably would come under the context of replacing theatre. If you look at, especially through COVID, places brought out broadcasting services, so they recorded or had already pre-recorded loads of shows and put it online. So you could see a dip in that, but you could say as well, like, is this a newer thing, or maybe could it be adapted into theatres as well? Yes.
I think there's this is more of I'm curious about your personal preference question, but obviously augmented reality over the pandemic, just before that, we had like you put on a headset and you're in the FA Cup final, you're in the seat watching, or you're in a musical in the theatre, turning around and watching the performance as if you were there. But there's a long way between that and something that's kind of like on a screen, or in front of you while you're on the bus. When do you suppose the question is, when do you stop experiencing a live experience? Because I think I find it really interesting that you just said that you think it could replace theatre, whereas I don't know if that's the case. So I suppose to bring it back to the question, and I'm sorry I've gone around this a long way, but where do you draw the line on augmented reality? Where does this sit within experiencing live performances?
I would say I'd draw the line when it's actually taking full shows. Like, my vision for this was to adapt shows to it, especially, or create new shows. A lot of smaller shows that could benefit a lot from this. But I do believe drawing the line would be for the bigger shows. Like, I don't think you could really do, like, for example, the ballet. Like, you could watch it on that, but to get the full experience, I feel like augmented is just before going to a show. But like I said, in my personal opinion, is that you can't beat actually being there in person and seeing a show.
Okay, that's the philosophical approach.
Yeah.
Practical. Why couldn't you? I mean, I can imagine why you couldn't do these big musicals, but just as someone who doesn't really understand what this stuff is, hit me with it. Why can't you, on a practical level, do a big musical?
On a practical level, the recording software, especially for the volumetric recordings, is that you're only in a small space, so that you couldn't record. To this day, you can't record, like, say, a sizable stage space, and you couldn't have that interaction. So obviously, like I said, with Everything Limbo was only a solo performance because of the size that it has to be. So it only has to be like a room which is like a 4x4 room. So you can only, like I said, with Crossover there, you can just squeeze about 3 people into it. So it is quite small at the moment. Hence why I'd say the bigger shows couldn't really do it.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you, Carl.
Hello all, and welcome to my contemporary production technologies presentation, where I aim to take the woman in black where it has not and where it is yet to go, which is virtual reality. So, as I've mentioned, the woman in black is my production concept, but briefly on VR. VR is a great tool for live performance. It is still fairly niche, but it is being sort of developed and sort of pioneered by the National Theatre and their immersive storytelling studio, and they've had a couple of virtual reality performances since 2016. So immersive, interactive and multi-sensory viewer-centered 3D computer-generated environments is how scholars describe VR. VR performance, although visually immersive, VR has one sort of key flaw, in my opinion, and that's the sound aspect. is not immersive enough. So although spatial audio has been considered by the performances done by the National Theatre, it has only been set on one plane and it has no field of depth, which is why I've opted for my sort of performance to use ambisonics, which will encounter depth as well. So, I broke down 3 key things that are needed for this performance to work. So, live visuals, being motion capture, pre-recorded sound, and a performance space. So, motion cap. So, there are 3 aspects for the motion capture that is needed. So, the software itself, suits, and camera equipment. So the software I would opt to use would be Xsense by Movella. It's relatively affordable compared to other sort of motion capture aspects, and it's significantly cheaper than sort of other ways of doing motion capture. And they also offer their own motion capture suits which are highly compatible with their software. However, the suits are quite expensive, but according to my research, they claim that their suits are relatively affordable compared to other motion capture suits, and their software is already highly compatible with virtual reality headsets such as the Oculus Quest 2 or the HTC Vive, and they have also used it in a live basis, which is what I would aim to do. So the motion capture suits are also wireless. They have 6-hour battery life. They have 17 points within the suits, which is what the software picks up on. And you can have up to 4 performers at one time using the software, and 4 suits in the software being tracked. In terms of camera equipment, unlike other virtual reality and motion capture software, it isn't necessary to need camera with the Xsense. However, you can use sort of either an iPhone with their app, or you can even just use a web camera as a reference camera, which will just overall improve the sort of smoothness and the quality. So, to do with the soundscape and dialogue, I would opt to sort of have to pre-record the dialogue using a ambisonic mic, whether that be one offered by Rode. They offer lots of ambisonic mics, sort of in the region of about £1,000. However, in terms of the actual mixing of it, the Ableton software, as you can see, it allows, with the Envelop plugin, for live mixing of the ambisonic audio. So what that would mean is you could have a technician maintain the sort of positioning, because obviously even with the performers in the space performing with the motion capture, no matter how much they're rehearsing, there is still the likelihood for human error, which would then mess up your mix and where the positioning of certain sound effects can be coming from. So having someone there to sort of rectify these mistakes and mix live means that it will just have a smoother and more consistent viewer performance. The performance space and the headsets. So I would aim to have 2 performers, one for obviously the woman in black, one for, I have forgotten his name, but he plays the solicitor character that we follow around in this VR performance around the house. I would opt for about 8 audience members, as I found that was like relatively affordable when using Oculus Quest 2 headsets, which would cost for 8 of them about £2,000. You need obviously a sort of large space to to have this performance taking place in, and to have the appropriate space to have all the equipment set up for the technicians to be able to tech the event. And as an example, that is the fabulous Wonder.Land show that was done in the National Theatre's immersive storytelling studio, and that is an example of what a space could look like. However, I would probably opt for a larger space, as I would want my performer to be able to like walk around the space in promenade with the actors that are performing. So some of the advantages of my concept is that with the use of ambisonics, it hasn't been done like practically. It has only been sort of discussed, and I from my research I've seen that it's only sort of been discussed about how it could theoretically be done. So it's not been done yet. In terms of the equipment being used, it's relatively cost efficient considering the technology being used. However, it is still $40,000 US. Obviously, in terms of adaptation, the show itself isn't really set, and the software itself can be changed. So as long as the technology advances, there's no real sort of like scope to say that you wouldn't be able to have more than 4 performers, which would then expand the ability to have large performances as well. And yeah, so the overall adaptation is a great advantage of the sort of software. So some of the disadvantages, the upfront cost is quite high, even though it is relatively affordable, as mentioned before. Also, the show is very highly reliant on technology and the technicians' knowledge. So if anything was to go wrong, it would really, really, really need the technicians to know how to fix problems quickly and work on the job. So, and especially with something that's such a new technology in terms of virtual reality and ambisonics, it would really need your technicians to know the equipment that they're using. And in terms of virtual reality, motion sickness can occur, but that is unfortunately unavoidable at this current moment in time. Any questions? Danny?
Why does the woman in black lend itself to this way of experiencing?
So my thought process was that when you think of sort of a horror, like little sounds and footsteps and sort of like screams and stuff from different places around you, it will really add to what you're seeing visually. So when you're thinking of spatial audio compared to ambisonics, the spatial audio, although it can be placed around you, it can't be placed above you or below you. And in the setting of the woman in black, being on a house that has like multiple different levels to it, you wouldn't just want to have to put something, you'd want to be able to put something from above and below you depending on where the performance is taking place. So, which would just add to the overall sort of like immersion and aspect of horror, I would argue.
And a follow-up is, would you say you would wanting to spec this on Oculus Rifts? Would you provide something else in terms of sort of audio hardware, or would you rely on the provision that's in the
So
devices?
you could plug in headphones. I didn't include that, as I would argue it depends on what the venue wants in terms of their budget, because obviously it's quite a steep cost already. So adding another 8 pairs of headphones in, you could either do that quite cheaply, or you could just simply leave it and not add the extra cost, as the headsets themselves do already have speakers inbuilt. Obviously, for the terms of the immersion and just an overall improved performance, yes, having headphones would be better. However, I'd argue that's down to what your budget is and what the venue would want.
So, obviously, Danny just asked about Woman in Black. and you've mentioned the house. The Woman in Black takes place in a theatre, and then someone describes being in a house. They also describe being in like a hotel in the street. Are you only picking a portion of this to run through?
It was more of an adaptation of
Okay.
more from the book,
Okay.
I'd argue, with loosely coming from the theatre background and taking the sort of the way that VR technology has been utilised in theatre and sort of marrying to it.
Okay. So the plan is to do the entire story, correct? It's like a
As much as possible, I am aware that some of it takes place outside of the set house.
Okay. Follow-up question. You said it would be Kipps, the protagonist, and the woman,
Yeah.
the people you experience.
Yeah.
So you would experience from the perspective of Woman in Black.
No, it would be more, I'd argue, for this performance, in my head, it would be like a sort of promenade experience where you'd follow him round as he's sort of uncovering what's happened in this sort of backstory, and then you'd hear and be able to see the woman as well, roaming around the space as well as the story progresses.
I see. So it's a narrative adaptation
Yes.
where we follow the protagonist
Yes.
and the woman appears.
Yeah.
I've got you now. Cool. Thank you.
Jake.
Be able to just briefly explain what ambisonics is?
So, at its simplest form, first order ambisonics essentially is 4 different points of audio to create a sphere. So your left, right, and your up and down, and that creates a sphere around it.
Nice, thank you.
Right.
How does that differ from spatial audio or object-based audio?
So other sort of systems that's been used in theatre is the Lisa system, where you can place the audio in specific points. Obviously, that would revolve around, as I mentioned, you can add a lot more depth and sort of systems that are within theatre currently are kind of limited by what you can do in terms of the rig and setup you've got of your sound and where it's coming from. Whilst if you take it into VR, it's sort of not as limited, as sort of scale and depth isn't really a limitation, and sort of venue size isn't a limitation as well.
Okay, any other questions? Okay.
Hello everyone, welcome to my presentation looking at binaural audio and implementing it into theatre, and specifically I'm going to talk about Macbeth as a text and as a play and as a production. Firstly, I'm sure many of you already know, but just to clarify, what is binaural audio? Binaural audio essentially replicates the way your ears will hear sound in a real life environment, and when you record it through headphones, it should sound, with high quality enough microphones, will sound exactly as you would hear it in the space, in real time. So lots of ways of recording binaural audio will be with a dummy head with anatomically correct ears attached with microphones inside, so that it replicates the way the sound would bounce off your cartilage and into your eardrum for a more realistic experience of the sound. One of the great things about binaural audio is that it's very immersive. If you saw my little exhibit, you might have seen that I would use a dummy head and click the left and right ear. You would hear that in your right headphone, left headphone, as well as whispering into the right ear. You then hear me whispering into your right ear, and it creates quite a immersive, almost sort of an illusion thing. When you get to the very high end of binaural audio, many people have a physical reaction to it, like ASMR, and it's described as audiosomatic, so that it produces a physical reaction in the body. So if, for example, on a binaural dummy head, if I breathed down the back of the neck of that head, with high quality enough microphones, you would be able to feel someone breathing down the back of your neck. And it probably feels a bit disgusting, but it's very good theatre. Now, binaural audio, sort of in theatre, came to the forefront during the pandemic. It was used as a technology to sort of bypass the ways in which people couldn't make theatre in the traditional, typical sense. So a really good example of that is Blindness, which was made in 2021. As you can see in this picture, everything was pre-recorded using what I believe is an NU1000 binaural dummy head, which is very high quality, quite expensive. And the show was essentially an exhibition with various atmospheric lighting and atmospheric set, where people would come in, socially distance, place headphones on, and have that sound experience as a show. At the height of the pandemic, that was sort of groundbreaking for what it was essentially, but it had been used in theatre before. So 2016 was sort of the initial peak of binaural audio, sort of coming to the forefront of theatre. A production designed by Simon McBurney was The Encounter in 2016, which was one of the first sort of productions that got lots of critical acclaim for using binaural audio and creating a soundscape that was recorded site-specific. So he went to the Amazon rainforest and recorded soundscapes there, as well as that performance consisted of recreating soundscapes on a very sort of budget level as the performance. I think it's important to note with these two examples, it's less of a typical staging of a show. It's more of, for example, with this, it's not necessarily theatrical in a sense, it's more of an experience, and what was I saying? It's, yeah, I have a really good point, but never mind. This is a really good example of binaural audio being implemented in a sort of typical stage end-on setup. So Anna was made in 2019, before the pandemic, using in-ear microphones instead of a dummy head, which The Encounter and Blindness both used. So it was all from the auditory perspective of Anna. The only dialogue or conversations you would hear is what the actress or the character at the time would be hearing. One thing that I thought was really interesting about this was sort of instead of the shows beforehand sort of playing with the technology as the performance itself, this is more embedded into the show itself, and I sort of wanted to use that in my idea, which is binaural Macbeth. My concept for Macbeth was essentially an immersive binaural first-person perspective of Macbeth, so everything you see of that show is from his perspective. I think the text itself and the show itself lends itself very well to soundscapes and a very interesting immersive sound design, and I sort of wanted to focus on the mental decline of Macbeth as he goes throughout acts in the show, and also sort of taking the hallucinations, which are a massive part of Macbeth, and taking those in a more auditory light, while also not neglecting the sort of visual aspect of it. So I think there are 4 sort of key concepts that come with implementing binaural audio in a show like Macbeth. So the first one is soundscapes. I hate to say it, sort of self-explanatory. The supernatural elements of Macbeth lend itself well, such as the witches, which I will demo for you in a minute, and being able to field record binaural soundscapes, such as a forest, for example, when Macbeth and Banquo meet the witches, having that elevates that immersion. In terms of dialogue as well, Macbeth, again, as a text, has a lot of conspiracy, and in Act 1, Scene 5, Lady Macbeth whispers to Beth, essentially convincing him to kill the king, and I think that it raises more of the tension if you're not just seeing that being whispered into his ear, but you're feeling it in your own ear, and you can feel the breath of the actress on your own ear with high enough quality audio. Again, with dialogue, you can already see that in Anna, which was done 4 years ago now, but it didn't implement any pre-recorded elements in that show. What I wanted to do with Macbeth, as it's a very first-person perspective and looking at his sort of mental decline, being able to hear his inner thoughts as a pre-recorded element, overlaying or overlaid over live dialogue that you would be seeing on stage, I think adds another element of a lens into the character's brain. I think one of the most interesting aspects of using binaural audio was something that Anna did as well, was they would have pieces of set that you could not physically see. So Anna was set in a flat where there would be rooms in that flat that you could not see, but characters would go into and you could hear. And because the audio quality was so high, you would be, even though you can't see it, you can spatially understand where a character is in relation to Anna. You can feel how big that room is. You can feel where that is, and that contrast between not being able to visually see it on stage or physically on stage, but being able to hear it at such a high quality that you almost can see it, I think allows for a lot more immersion. And then applying that to Macbeth, there's a scene, Act 3, Scene 4, is when Macbeth hallucinates Banquo sat at the dinner table, and I think having the experience of you are hearing through Macbeth's perspective and able to say, I know that that character is sat at that chair, but I can't see it. I think that adds a really nice level of the hallucination, and it sort of, you get to hear the world through Macbeth's lens, but see it through an objective lens. And I like that idea a lot, and incorporating binaural audio in a more conceptual way instead of just, I'm hearing what I would hear if I was on stage. So, if you would like to place your headphones on, I'm going to show you, or play you, essentially a soundscape and binaural dialogue recorded by Almost Tangible Theatre Company. They did a binaural reading of Macbeth as a podcast in 2020, I believe. It was on site, so I took that dialogue and added a soundscape to it. Yes, I'm going to play it. Didn't realise the person was on this entire time. take your headphones off now. Essentially, that was Act 1, Scene 3, where Macbeth and Banquo meet the witches in the forest and they prophesy to Macbeth. And that was recorded on using a dummy head. It wasn't using in-ear microphones, so you don't get the idea of having it be really perspective-based. But I still think that it does add a different level to that scene. And you know, I mocked up that soundscape in an hour. You could give a sound designer complete free rein. They could do field recordings of certain settings and really elevate that to a new space. In terms of technology, you would of course need in-ear microphones. So I was looking at the DPA4560, which are essentially just two microphones. They're two omnidirectional microphones that are mounted on ear hooks. They are worn exactly the same as you would wear a mic pack for an actor, and they are designed to fit any ears, any sort of head shape, things like that. But the main sort of technology comes in with the headphone system and the transmitters and receivers. So one of the main ones that I looked at, or the best one that I looked at, was essentially a hire company or a rental company called Place Over Ears, where they would offer a system and they would give you 100 headphones, one transmitter for one channel, so you could scale it up and have 3 transmitters and have 3 different channels. So if you wanted more characters' perspectives, you could switch between them. But yeah, it essentially works as a system where you have various headphones with a receiver in them, one transmitter. The transmitter that I'm using, provided by the Lincoln Company, has a massive range, so you've not got to worry about people having to go outside maybe. So for example, if you're in a show and you need to pop to the loo, you don't have to risk losing every part of that point of the show, because you can just take your headphones with you and the range will still be there. In terms of cost, so I tried to approach this not looking at the massively high-end things, but looking at things that are more affordable but still good quality. The DPA4560 that I was saying comes in at around £850. You can get them for much, much cheaper. You'd just be sacrificing a lot of your audio quality for that. For pre-recorded elements and having a dummy head, you can start off quite cheap actually. So a 3DO is around £360 for a very basic version, and then £560 for more integration. And B1E, which is sort of the most budget dummy head that I could find, inbuilt microphones, everything already set up, was around £600. In terms of the audience headphone system, I looked at buying in-house to keep if you wanted to do more productions of this in the same venue, or renting, like I said, Place Over Ears Limited. So when I got a quote from various companies, I said I want 100 headphones and I want one transmitter for one channel, and I want it for 2 weeks in July. So 10th of July to 24th of July. And from Place Over Ears Limited, it was about, well, it was £1,014.50, which included shipping, collection, hygiene afterwards, a hygiene kit to maintain throughout the run, which I personally think is quite reasonable actually. When you look at buying, and also a lot of the other quotes I got was around the same ballpark. It's just dependent on the type of headphones you want. So for Place Over Ears, they do a lot of wireless conferences and wireless festivals. So they're sort of more geared towards comfortable long wear use, which I think is incredibly important because a lot of people don't want to sit with uncomfortable headphones for 2 hours. Then looking at buying for in-house, the only sort of one I could see that was the most detailed, the brand name literally is Silent Disco Kit, don't know why, but they had 50 headphones and 3 transmitters, and that was £2,000. So if you're buying for in-house versus renting, you're sort of looking at quadrupling that cost essentially. But all in all, for something like that, at a pretty basic model, you're looking at around £3,000 if you don't have anything in-house already. You can scale that up for better audio, better comfort in headphone use, but all in all, around £3,000, £3,500. And also, in my opinion, I think you can justify that by saying things that are it's such a sound-heavy show, you're not necessarily looking at massive budgets for set. You can focus some of that money and budget into your sound design to further it a bit more. Strengths and weaknesses. As everyone has said, it's immersive, it's intimate. Having someone whisper into your ear is completely different to having someone, you know, whispering over a PA. I was saying at a demo earlier, with the Ghost of Banquo, if you can spatially orientate where that character is, that's completely different to having someone off stage, an actor off stage, speaking into a microphone and you're hearing it over a PA. It doesn't give the same effect of not seeing that character on stage but hearing them if you know that you can say that's where they would be sitting instead of I'm hearing this voice over a PA. In terms of design, I would put this in an in-the-round setting, and I think that the problems that come with sound design for in the round, you can practically solve all of them immediately with audience headsets, and not sacrificing any of that audio and having even better audio, arguably. I also think it's quite a versatile idea. You could apply this to any show. I personally believe you could probably apply it to any Shakespeare show. And also, you don't necessarily have to do it with one character. You can scale that up to having 4 different channels for 4 different characters. And I think that you can apply that, and also applying binaural audio in less of a hands-on-the-nose approach. Hands on the nose? That's not the phrase. On the nose. On the nose. No hands on the nose. It doesn't have to be so on the nose that it's like, oh, this audio is just good quality. You can add soundscapes, you can add elements of the hallucinations that are just applicable to this show, but things like that. Weaknesses, I think it's still going to be viewed as experimental for a very long time. I think binaural audio sort of being at the forefront of the pandemic when people couldn't see shows in the same way before, I think now it's sort of been left with this impression that it's an alternative to theatre instead of something that can be applied, readily applied, and still have a theatrical experience of it. Again, just basic things. Headphone fatigue. People will get sick of wearing headphones for 2 hours. It's kind of unavoidable, but that's why you have to invest in better quality headphones and long wear headphones. Also, going back to experimental, I think that, yes, people view it as something, as an alternative, but there's definitely the market for people interested in sound. If you look at Sound of Metal as a film, not necessarily a theatre production, but a film, that it was essentially a sound experience in itself, and that did phenomenally at the box office, was critically acclaimed. There's still the audience for people that are enthusiastic about sound and getting a new sound experience. But again, with headphones, you will have a limited audience size depending on your budget. The most I saw, when I was asked this earlier, the most I saw was you could get around 500 headphones for one transmitter. But, what was I going with this? 500 headphones for one transmitter, obviously you would be scaling that budget up massively. But there isn't necessarily a cap on the amount you can use, but more on how much you can fit in with your budget. Anyway, any questions? Hello, Danny.
What do you imagine the implications on the performers are for having to work with binaural in this capacity? How would you brief your Macbeth about their new performance conditions in order to harness the concept you're trying to achieve with binaural audio?
I think having the element of pre-recording allows them to adjust to that more, and you might use that throughout the show. So it's sort of an introduction, but also something that you're not wasting your time on. I genuinely think that you can get a great understanding of what binaural audio is in 5 minutes with a really good demonstration. I mean, sorry, that sounds like I'm really bigging myself up, but like I managed to explain to people earlier what binaural audio was in 2 minutes, and they all went, wow, that's really cool. So I think that your mic setup isn't necessarily anything groundbreaking. It's essentially wearing in-ear monitors, but instead of monitors, they're microphones now. I'd just say people interacting with it, you need to sort of troubleshoot that and ensure that you're getting the right levels from it, essentially.
I guess it's more of a comment, that the idea that you're expecting your cast not to worry about their live projected voice,
Oh, right, yeah.
right?
Mm.
Because the audience aren't encouraged to take those headphones off.
Yeah.
So whatever they present to the space vocally themselves
Mm.
isn't what we're trying to capture.
I think it's sort of like actors going from stage to screen and sort of playing down the visual and dialogue elements, but instead of both, they're just dialing down the dialogue, because you still want to convey the same sort of physical presence on stage, but you can be more refined with how you deliver your lines, I think.
I just have a little bit of, to clarify then, so you're an audio designer for Macbeth.
Yeah.
Is it live or is it pre-recorded? And how do those two things work together? 'Cause
So
that's-
my concept is essentially, or my vision for it is, everything is live, but it's from essentially 2 microphones. So everything is performed live from Macbeth. You just might have pre-recorded elements such as a soundscape running over that dialogue on top of pre-recorded dialogue, but not anything that is very, very profound, because I think that with binaural audio you have to keep it from the perspective of Macbeth. I don't think it would then make sense for Lady Macbeth to have a soliloquy that you can't hear because you're watching it from another character's perspective.
Which brings me to what you raised about headphone fatigue. You quite nicely selected, like, I think 4 key points where this stuff would be applicable. Is the plan that the audience would only need the headphones for these bits?
No. I think that these are just sort of key points that are really, really elevated by it, but I still think that having your entire show being from a binaural and auditory perspective is something that people haven't really tapped into yet. And also, that's not because it's unfeasible. Anna did the same thing and everything was from that perspective. It gives a nice shift into the show and into the text, or lens into the text. But
one thing from me, because I absolutely love the idea. Darkfield, I don't know if you've heard of them. So they do a series of shows, one called Seance, there was one called Flight, where literally the entire thing is done by binaural sound. They're only 20 minutes long because of headphone fatigue. So I suppose you found these points for a reason for why these could be good points to put the headphones on. But Beth is over 3 hours long.
yeah.
That I suppose is similar to Danny's final point. That's more of a comment than a question. But yeah, what we're talking 3 hours, potentially 3 hours.
I was also going to say, given it sort of fixes its own problem in a way, because if you've got, I think when you start to incorporate other characters within your microphones, you will run into that problem. But given that it's a single character's perspective, a lot of external scenes that do not have Macbeth, you're no longer going to see anymore, because if he's not present, you're not going to hear it. So I think that begins to cut down the time a little bit, but I do think that headphone fatigue is something that is sort of unavoidable. You can remedy it to an extent with good quality headphones and things like that, but I don't necessarily think that there's, unfortunately, as much of an answer that I can give to that, except Sky.
How would you adapt it for somebody who has like sensory issues with hearing?
I think it's important to note that with anything that is headphones that is sort of more out of your control, it can be quite overwhelming. So again, it's important to have volume levels on your own headsets that you can adjust yourself. I think if you could scale this up and have more channels that people can flick through where it's mixed differently, so if you're someone who is overwhelmed by the soundscapes, you can dial that back and purely listen to the dialogue, or if you're really, it's not it's moving away from the accessibility, but if you're someone who really, really likes those soundscapes, you can go onto a channel that is more soundscape based and the dialogue's more secondary. I think it's more just sort of scaling up the sort of channels and the individual freedom you have with your headsets. I think that's what I would say. Thanks, guys.
Any other questions? No? Well done.